Okay, so seeing a few more people joining. We're just hanging on for a few minutes to see for people to join, to give people a bit of a chance to join. But yeah, feel free to say hi in the chat if you would like. Hello from India. Hi. Hi, different attendees. Okay, because it's 5 past now, I'm gonna welcome you all. Thank you for joining this webinar. And I'm going to be passing over to Lutman in a second. But this is an interactive session, and if you want to ask questions, please post them in the chat. So yeah, so you should all see the chat function. So please post any questions there, and at the end, I'll moderate those and we'll get to them. So yeah, feel free to send them throughout the recording. And now I'll pass over to Lutman to take over with the presentation.
Nice, thank you, Priya, and hello, Houston, hello, San Francisco, hello, South Africa, hello, all of you. Good to have you here. As she said, feel free to type in the chat as and when you have a question, just feel free to type in. I'll be checking intermittently and then answering them as we go. So let's get started. Cloud deployment options for Jakarta EE applications. This is a very interesting topic, something that I'm personally very much interested in, because most of the time, Jakarta EE has been or has had a lot of problems in terms of what it actually is and how to actually use it. From the days of Java EE all the way to Jakarta EE, there's always been some misconceptions. Now, in terms of cloud deployment, essentially almost every application now is a web application. Really, nobody does desktop again. All applications, most enterprises are migrating most of the applications to the cloud. So there are a myriad of options out there to choose from. Now, before we discuss the technicality of the options, I think we need to set the stage. Now, right from the beginning, Jakarta EE or Java EE has been a platform that always separates your application code from the underlying runtime. So Jakarta EE has always been the platform where you have the abstract specifications, you have JPA, Jakarta REST, you have all those specifications, and then you can, at least in theory, plug in different runtimes for the implementations. That has always been the way Jakarta EE or Java EE then has been. So you could always plug in different runtimes, or what they used to call application servers. You could always plug in and deploy your application. That was when things were in-house. Now things are in the cloud. Application deployment has changed. And so what are your options? Now, because of the separation of the runtime from the application code, you always end up with very light deployment artifacts. So your Jakarta EE deployment artifact, the WAR file, is mostly just your application code and third-party libraries that you bundle. And so generally, you have very lighter deployment artifacts. Now, this brings us to the question, what are the options available for you when it comes to getting your application out there to the wider internet public? And generally, there are 3 broad options. We have the traditional one, which practically everybody has done, or most organizations started with, because a lot of things started in-house. We have the bare metal virtual machine option. And this option is just, as it states, bare metal. You have a virtual machine with just an operating system, and you essentially have to do the plumbing yourself. You download your runtime, you deploy your application, however, whether you SFTP into it or FTP into the server to upload the deployment, to upload the runtime or download directly, it doesn't really matter. In the end, you have a bare metal machine where you have to put your own runtimes together. And then you have, for the second option, now I'll be going through all of them. So I'm just giving the best eye view. We'll look at the code and then we dive into the actual lab if you so will. And then we have infrastructure as a service. Now, IaaS or IaaS is sort of in between the three options. You have a step above the bare metal where you can ship your application to by abstracting your application or wrapping your application in abstractions like containers. So most of the time you will package your application as Docker containers, ship to some kind of registry, and then whichever cloud deployment provider you use will have some option to expose your application through the containers you uploaded to the registry. Now, there are different options for that, but generally that is the modus operandi of that. So you upload your containers and the containers are exposed through some kind of mechanism, underlying infrastructure. That infrastructure that takes your packaged containers and exposes it to the internet is the service that you end up paying for. And then you have the runtime as a service where most of the time you just have the runtime. And the runtime is Jakarta EE, in our case, Jakarta EE runtime, where all you do is what I call bring your own binary, where you take your application binary and then deploy it on the runtime and it's done. That's all you do. So we have these three broad options that you can use to deploy your application. Now, for this webinar, I prepared a sample code. It's a very simple code. It's an application that uses the OpenAI GPT API to carry out two functions. You can the first function or feature of the application is that you can give it the name of a city and then a budget, and then it will give you suggestions of what you can do, itinerary in that city with that budget. And then the second one, you can describe some image requirements in text, and then the API will generate the image for you. So it's a Jakarta EE application, fairly trivial application that we are using the API to demo and then deploy the application. So let's start with our first option. For our first option, which is the VM option, I pre-set up a virtual machine here. Now, this virtual machine is running on Microsoft Azure, and you can see here it's a Linux machine, Ubuntu 20.04 here that I set up for this demo. It's a bare metal machine. There's nothing. Now, in the machine, I had to install Java and then download Enterprise, Payara Enterprise, as you can see here. This is the Payara Enterprise 6.5. I downloaded that and then uploaded the binary. Now, in Payara, you can upload your binary to change directory here, Payara 6, glassfish, domains, domain 1. And then I can say auto deploy here. So in the auto deploy folder here, you just upload your WAR file and then the server will deploy it. Now, to save time for the purposes of this webinar, so you can have a lot more time for interactivity, I created everything. If I go back here, or if I do an ls here, you can see the application was uploaded and is deployed. So for the virtual machine that I created here, I had to do some initial plumbing, set up Java, and then download Enterprise, Payara Enterprise there, and then deploy my application. And this particular one, this is a very simple workflow for the purposes of this particular demo. But in an enterprise or in your company or in your own use case, you probably will end up with a fairly non-trivial case that in the VM, for instance, it will require you to do quite some plumbing. You need to install a few libraries, you need to install a few stuff, you need to do some setups. And in this case, for instance, you need to manage firewall and everything. So over here in my Azure console here, I'll need to manage a few things here. I'll need to manage security, port rules, and there is some kind of involvement in this because you are practically doing the heavy lifting on your own. Now, the advantage with this is that you have all the flexibility you can think of, all the flexibility you can have is available to you because you are essentially crafting your own stuff. You are essentially creating your own. Can you see my screen, Priya?
I can.
Which are you looking at? Are you looking at the browser or the?
I can see the IDE.
Nope, I'm not so sure why Zoom is sharing that. Let me stop sharing and reshare. I'm sharing a browser window, so 1 second. Advanced.
Yeah, if you're sharing a browser window, I don't think I can see that. So it might be that the screen share has changed.
Yeah, let me just share the screen. 1, 2, desktop, 3. Yes, this one. You should see my.
Yeah, there we've got your browser now.
Okay, great.
Okay,
thank you very much for bringing this to my attention. Nice. See, this is why I like interactivity. Great. So let me just backtrack a little. This is my Microsoft Azure console. I created a bare metal virtual machine, which runs on Ubuntu 20.04 here. And in this machine here, I SSH into the machine. Can you see my terminal?
We can see that.
Yeah, so I SSH into the terminal and into the server, and then downloaded a copy of Payara Enterprise, unzipped it. Now, even before downloading the runtime, I had to install Java through SDK-man version. Yeah, I had to install Java manually through SDK-man, and then I had to download the runtime. Then I had to upload a binary. So if I do ls Payara 6 glassfish domains, domain 1, auto deploy. Yeah. If I do this, you can see the application wall is here, and then that's finally deployed. Now I had to configure in the console here to get an IP address. I also had to configure the port rules here. In terms of setting up the SSH, I needed to set up the security rules, upload my SSH public key, and there was some fair amount of plumbing to get things up and running for this option here. For this option here. Can everybody see my browser? I'm in the browser now.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, nice. Yes. So I did some fair bit of plumbing and everything to get this guy up and deploy the application. So now with the application deployed, if I come here, move this to this window. Now this is the virtual machine. As you can see here, this is the virtual machine. This is the IP address. And then after a bit of the plumbing and gymnastics, if you so will, we have the application deployed. So this is the binary that I uploaded to the Payara Enterprise server. By the way, you can always download a trial of the Payara Enterprise server to take it for a spin. So this is the binary I uploaded. This is deployed now. So let's take this for a spin. Let me go here and say a group of developers in a webinar, for instance. Let me see what image GPT is going to generate for us. Hopefully, it generates something nice. Hopefully. Wow, okay. I'm not so sure. Priya, are you seeing my browser?
Yeah, we can see what it's created, I think.
Okay.
The very distorted man.
Yeah, I have a few questions about what GPT is generating for us, but yes, so our application is deployed. Now, this is the first option, and generally, this is the oldest and most traditional of deployment options. You just get a virtual machine, and this VM can be in-house, or it can be from a cloud provider. In this case, I'm using Azure, but you can have it in-house as well. Shouldn't really matter. In the end, it's the same. You get the bare metal, and then you put your own infrastructure together and then deploy. And so this is the VM. And as you can see, even though I abstracted a few things, if you start from scratch, there is a fair bit of work involved. Now, the question comes, when should I pick this? It's always a matter of it depends. But then you can't really make a good and optimized decision without assessing all the other options. So now let's look at the second option. The second option, if we go back to the IDE here, hopefully everybody can see my IDE and the notes. If we go back to the note here, the second option is infrastructure as a service. Now, infrastructure as a service, in this case, we package our application in Docker containers and then give it to some kind of pre-configured infrastructure to take that container and expose it for us. Now, this is a middle ground in the sense that you get to pre-package your application. So whatever runtime you need, whatever, all of those things are pre-packaged into the container, and then you ship it out to the infrastructure. So let's take a look at it. Now, in this example here, this application code here, I already pre-packaged and pushed the containers, the container to Microsoft Azure. This is the Docker file here. As you can see, it's a fairly simple Docker file. We pull the Payara. In this case, we are using the community version, the latest version. And then we simply copy the deployment artifact into the deployment directory here, and then expose some port here. Now, if we go back to my Azure console here, if I come to container registry here, this is my Azure container registry. Now, in this registry here, I pre-uploaded that. Now, you always need some kind of registry. You could push to Docker Hub, shouldn't really matter, but somewhere where you'll be pushing the containers to, from which the infrastructure is going to take that and then deploy that. So if I go to the repositories here, hopefully everybody can see my browser. If I open this, this is the container. Nice. This is the container I pushed here. So I packaged the application as a Docker container and then pushed it to the container registry provided by Microsoft Azure. Now, you can do the same thing with AWS or with Google Cloud. I am just used to using Azure. There's really no particular reason why I'm using Azure other than I'm quite comfortable with it. So you can replicate the same thing in AWS or Google Cloud Platform or any other public cloud provider. So we have our container pushed here. This is the first step. Now, the second step is to deploy this container on the provided infrastructure so we can access the application on the public cloud. In the registry here is just a place, sort of a vault to keep the container. We need to expose this. And Azure has an infrastructure as a service in the form of the Azure Web App. So if I come here, we call it App Service. App Service allows you to take a prepackaged Docker container and expose it as a web application. So I configured everything to take the registry that we push the container we push to the registry and expose it as a web application. So if I come to the configuration here, again, if you have any question, feel free to ask. As we continue with the discussion, just feel free to ask your question as we go. So if I come here, you can see there is a Docker registry setting here that we push or that we pull the container image from. And so the runtime here pulls the image and then does all the building and everything, and then gives you a way to access the application. So in this case, if I go to this URL, you can see this is the runtime. Now, if I go to the context path here, like this, this should give us the application again. So this time around, it's the same application, but packaged as containers deployed to or pushed to Azure's container registry and then deployed to Azure Web Apps. So a bit of plumbing involved in there as well. And it's the same. Let me try no, this time around, let me try the trip feature. So let's say I'm going to Houston and I have a budget of $2,500 here. So let's see what GPT says, the ChatGPT API says. Now, mind you, ChatGPT API's knowledge is limited to 2021. So it may give information that may not necessarily be fully accurate. That's fine. But we have some suggestions here. So we have the Space Center Houston, explore the wonders of space and learn about NASA's mission. Okay. And then there is, yes, the video should be recorded and you should have it after the webinar. Yes. And so we come, there is Buffalo Bayou Park, there is Rodeo Goat. Okay, this seems to be a restaurant. Try mouth-watering burgers and enjoy. Okay, now I am very curious about the choice that went into this name. But yeah, so this is it. We have it from GPT here. The same Jakarta EE application. Let's go back to the code. The same Jakarta EE application deployed to 2 different options. Now, before we proceed, let's look at the let's look at the various options, the options we've looked at, and then in what context to assess them. We've looked at the bare metal, and then we've looked at infrastructure as a service. Now, most of the time, when you are picking a runtime, there is a number of factors or checklists you want to consider. You want to consider the cost. You want to consider the complexity. Of course, your domain requirements, the regulatory requirements, developer productivity, the time to market, how fast can you turn around? Now, all these factors are really not necessarily straightforward. Most of the time, you are going to sort of hold some kind of compromise between them. So for instance, if you're an individual developer, you're going to look at developer productivity is going to be at the top of your list. If you are a huge company, you are going to consider cost and complexity and probably regulatory requirements. These are things that you're going to consider in different breaths when it comes to picking a runtime. You should keep this in mind. Now let's go to the third option, which is runtime as a service. Now by runtime as a service, what I mean is that you have a very native Jakarta EE runtime. Now, to situate things properly, by comparison with the Docker deployment, our application was abstracted into Docker containers. Now, the issue is that you first need to take your Jakarta EE application. You need to know Docker. You need to know how to configure X, Y, Z, how you need the application, all the incantations you do with Docker, you need to do that to wrap your application into a Docker image and then push it somewhere for a container to be created from it and then deployed on your behalf. So you have a step on top of your application for the second option, the infrastructure as a service. You need to package your application as Docker. Sometimes you need to configure Kubernetes, deployment descriptors, blah, blah. There is some fair bit of plumbing on top of that. Now, for runtime as a service, you have a native runtime. By native, I mean a runtime that fully supports Jakarta EE. So you don't need to do anything. It already supports Jakarta EE. In any case, you are deploying a Jakarta EE application. So it's already supported. And then all you do is that you take your WAR file. In this case, we only want to upload our binary, our WAR file here. We really don't care about the Docker and the Kubernetes and exposing the IP and the port, and we really don't care about that. The runtime should be able to abstract us from that. So in this case, you have your application, then you have the service managing the Docker and everything for you. And then all you do is bring your own deployment to the service. So this is the third option that you can access in the options available to you to deploy a Jakarta EE application. Now, before I demo that, one thing I would want us to notice is that for all these three options, we still need a runtime, a Jakarta EE runtime, to be able to run, because Jakarta EE itself is just a set of abstract specifications. You need an implementation to run that. So for all these options, we have an implementation powering them. So far, we've done the bare metal. We've looked at infrastructure, push to Docker, or package in Docker, push to the cloud, and then get it exposed through some provided service. Now let's explore the third option, which is a native service that you can use to deploy your application. And one of these native services is Payara Cloud. As the name implies, it's a cloud service for deploying Jakarta EE applications. So let's take it for a spin. Now, you can try. There is a 15-day free trial for this as well. Just like Azure has a lot of trials, you can also try Jakarta EE, Payara Cloud to deploy a Jakarta EE application for free for 15 days. So you can do exactly what I'm about to do. Now, when you sign in for your trial, you are going to get a namespace, a default namespace here called Start Dev. You can think of Start Dev as the counterpart to the Azure console we looked at. Maybe let me just put with the other browser so we can see things in proper context. So put those here. Good. So this is the Microsoft Azure console, and this is the Payara Cloud console here. Now, when you sign up for a free trial and then you get in, you have a namespace. Now, a namespace is simply a container for grouping your applications that share a common resource. So you get the default namespace, and we can go straight and say, create application here. Oh, we can come here, namespace actions, upload application, yes. You can upload an application. Upload application simply means literally upload application. So let's upload application. Let me pick the binary we created here. Go to File, Dolphin, copy location, go back to the browser. So here, let me upload my binary here. And then I can give the application a name. So I'll say this, and then upload. So now the binary is being uploaded. Now you can see that if you go back to our note here, the bring your own binary is exactly what we are doing. We brought our binary. We are not plumbing anything. We simply brought our binary to the service, and we are saying, yes, we are creating an application. Here's our binary. Take it, and then give us the options that we have. So let's go check this guy again. Here, our application has uploaded. Now you can see there's no URL yet, and then it says it's pending. So we can configure the application. Let's configure it. Let's go to edit configuration here. Now you can see we can have some options here. The scalability type, you can pick horizontal scaling, singleton, or rolling updates. The runtime size, let me pick one virtual CPU. You can see the runtime is Jakarta EE 10, rollover, blah, blah, blah. And then we have a context root here. And then these are all exposed through microprofile API. So if I go to the application again here, and I go to microprofile here, microprofile, oops, never mind, let me just open it here. Go to the resources, microprofile here. So the configurations that you are seeing on the UI here, you can simply set them. The configurations from microprofile properties here can be set on the UI here, simply as you can see. So you can add configurations, whatever your application needs. And then once you do your configuration, there's not much other than picking this runtime size. We can save. Again, you can sign up for a free trial of this. So a link will be shared with you after this, and then you can go and take this for a spin. So our application has been updated. We uploaded it. We did some configuration. And then now we can simply say deploy. And so now this should deploy application for us. And we should be able to access our application. So bring your own binary. Simply take the binary that you have. Okay, so it's deployed already. It's deployed now. If I click this, this may not have propagated yet because this is a new domain, a subdomain that we have. It may take a few minutes for this to propagate through the DNS system, but to all intents and purposes, our application is deployed, and so we can access it. So while we wait for this to propagate, it's already propagated anyway. So now the application is deployed. So it's the same. Let's go back to this guy and say a group of, maybe let's tune the query, Java developers solving world problems. This is something random I'm just doing. And then let's see what GPT suggests to us. Okay, this looks like some serious solutions coming out. Anyway, so our application is deployed, and all we did was to bring our binary to the service, and this is a native Jakarta EE service that is in the cloud that only asks you to bring your binary, and once you upload your binary, you can do configurations and whatever, and then deploy it. And you can see how fast it is. Now, let's go back to our note here. Again, runtime as a service, you are fully abstracted in the sense that we didn't have to plumb Docker, or we didn't have to install Java, or we didn't have to configure the port. We didn't have to do any of the things I did for the other two options. All I did was to bring my binary. And it's essentially just that, bring your own binary. Yes, this is a good question. There is, within the next quarter or next 2 quarters, you should be able to deploy it in your own cloud environment. So we are working on that feature as well. Now, back to our discussion here. We are fully abstracted, bring your own binary, and yeah, essentially we deployed it. So to recap again, before we continue with our discussion, we started with bare metal VM, where we had to do quite some plumbing, install Java, then install, download Payara Enterprise, then upload the binary and then deploy. And then we have containers. For the containers, what we did was to package our application. If I open our Docker file here, was to package our application into an image, push out to a registry. It can be any registry, shouldn't really matter. And then use some service. In this case, we use Azure App Service to deploy or expose, essentially create the containers from the image that we pushed and then expose it. Practically, that's all we did for the second option, and that is infrastructure as a service. And for the third option, which is Payara Cloud here, we simply uploaded our binary and then the runtime deployed it for us. And you could see how fast it was. So in the order of plumbing and the infrastructure, the digging you need to do, yes, Payara Cloud has a command line interface. They are all in the documentation there in the link she shared. So we have a command line interface where you can use it to, we are going to hold another webinar to see how you can automate it in a full end-to-end pipeline here. So yes, there is a command line interface, as you asked, Luxon, there's a command line interface. So yes, back to this console here, we uploaded the binary, and then it deployed everything on our behalf. We didn't really do a lot of, or any plumbing for that matter. All we did was to choose the CPU size. So in terms of complexity, from VM to Payara Cloud, we move from very, very complex or a lot of plumbing to practically bring your own device. And most of the time, that is exactly what you are going to have. You're going to find yourself in a situation where you have to make a decision. between complexity and efficiency or developer productivity. Now, the more complex the option, the more flexibility you can expect. So for instance, if you have, now let's go back to our notes, and then that should better guide us. The more complex the option, the more options you have. And so again, back to our considerations here, the question becomes, which is the best? And as with all issues in programming, and as has been the goal of Jakarta EE, is to give you the flexibility of picking whatever works for you. And that is why right from the beginning, Jakarta EE has been fully abstracted from the runtime. So in this case, you pick whichever makes you productive, first of all, as a developer. As Adam Bean, for those of you who know Adam Bean, has always been talking about, the first rule is productivity. What makes me productive? Because most of the time, you are a developer. For me, I'm a developer. The first thing I want to do, or the foremost thing, or my focus is to solve problems within the business domain. And so when I get a ticket or whatever it is, your goal is to solve the problem within the domain and all that. So most of the time, we are developers. And so if you're a developer, your first primary focus is solving the problem within the domain. And then you need to ask yourself how much complexity or how much other stuff in terms of DevOps and all of those things you can do. If you're in a big company that has a lot of resources, most companies have separate DevOps department that do all of these things, then your options, your considerations might be different. But if you're a small company that you have limited resources, and more importantly, you need to get to market very fast, you need to turn around very fast, you need to iterate very fast, your considerations will always be different. So for these three options we've looked at, I really would not recommend a VM, a bare metal VM, because that entails way too much and opens you to way too many things you need to consider. And so that leaves us with two options. You have the infrastructure as a service, and then you have the runtime as a service. Now, most of the time, you are going to do an it depends situation. So even within the same company, you can have one application deployed with one option, and then another application deployed with another option, because as with almost all things programming, it is an it depends situation. So in this case, it depends on the use case. But as you have seen, these two options have their own trade-offs. One option gives you full flexibility at the cost of added complexity. The other option gives you productivity at the risk of some form of losing flexibility. But then again, flexibility is always a question of how much flexibility do I need? And at what price do I get that flexibility? You need to, as a developer, those questions have to be answered. How much flexibility do I need? And at what price? And once you answer that fairly, you should be good. So for instance, in these two scenarios, the infrastructure as a service packaging application as Docker, in this case, your Jakarta EE application, you can always get a runtime, wrap it up as we did in our Docker file here. So for instance, you can download Payara Enterprise, you can pull Payara Enterprise, package as a Docker container, and then deploy it. And then if you are assessing the other option, in this case, bring your own deployment artifact, as I call it. Of course, you can sign up for free trial in Payara Cloud, and then you give it a spin. So all you do is upload your binary, and then you are done. Now, as you can see, we are not limited by anything. In this case, we have access to the internet because the application is able to make calls outside. It's practically bring your own deployment, literally bring it and then run it. So you don't need to package anything. There's no abstraction. There's nothing. So these two options are what you have. If your application, you have an existing application or you have an existing platform and everything, of course, Payara Enterprise is there for you to try. But if you're also looking for a faster cloud deployment option, Payara Cloud is an option for you to take a look at. And as I said, you can sign up for a 15-day free trial and then take it for a spin and then assess it within the context of your business requirement. It cannot be a one-cap-fits-all. You assess it within your own business requirements, and then you make a decision on that. Any questions so far? Nope, I don't see a question here. Nice. So yes, these are the options that we have. We have, again, let's go back to our notes. We have the bare metal here, where you do quite an amount of plumbing. You install Java, you download the runtime, you upload, you have to manage practically everything on your own. And then we have the middle ground, infrastructure as a service, where you do some kind of plumbing on top of the base application, but then that gives you a lot of flexibility at the cost of having to manage containers and whatnot and everything. And then we have the runtime, the native runtime as a service, where all you do is bring your own binary. So bring your binary, and then the runtime takes care of that for you. Done. So these are the options, and like I recommended, I don't recommend the first option, the bare metal option. That's one. I don't recommend it because it's fairly complicated for very little return. Of course, there's always exceptions if you have existing cases and all of that. It can be an option, but generally it shouldn't be your first option. And so we are left with the two. And these two, it's always an it depends situation. You should try both of them and then weigh them within the context of your business requirements, within the context of your own, even if you're doing a personal project, personal consulting, you weigh them within the context of a requirement, and then you make a decision. But in the end, you should try them. Developers will love to try. So try the two options and then see which is best for you. Azure has an amount of resources that you can try and replicate what we did for free. And then you can try Payara Cloud as well and see which of the two deployment options really works well for you. And then you can carry on with it. So to sum up, Jakarta EE has come, or formerly Java EE, has come a long way from the J2EE days where you had the likes of very complicated application servers, and you needed to do a lot of incantations to get things running, to the current era where you can simply and easily get your app in the cloud in record time. So these are the options for you. You can assess them within the context of these considerations, and then in the end, make a decision. But from a professional perspective, I wouldn't recommend you going for bare metal. That used to work, but in the current times that we are in, there are better options out there, and two of the options that give you the maximum flexibility and fastest productivity or best productivity and turnaround time. It's infrastructure as a service and runtime as a service. One gives you the ability to package. You use Docker to do everything. So you abstract your Java EE, your Jakarta EE application in Docker. And the other one simply says, bring your binary, and then we just deploy it for you. So in the end, try these two options and then see whichever works for you. For the infrastructure as a service, simply download Payara Enterprise, package it as Docker, and then give it a try. And then for runtime as a service, simply give Payara Cloud a try and see which of them works for you. Is there any questions so far?
Yeah, so we have one question,
okay.
Which is, in an IaaS scenario with an auto-scaling group, what is the best metrics to monitor for auto-scaling and how to expose them? So it's a little bit of a different topic. I don't know if you can give any.
Well, in the end, as I always say, and personally, I think for us developers, we mostly start with complexity. I wouldn't start worrying about scaling for an application until it is time to worry about scaling. And when you have an application and it is time to worry about scaling, you will know. So most of the time, if I am starting out, again, another recommendation springing from this question is start with the barest minimum, what just gets you the job done. And then as you grow your application, as you grow your user base, as you grow your customers, as you grow whatever the goal of your application is, then you will be identifying where you need to focus, where you need to expand. So for instance, if you deploy your application through, as I did, infrastructure as a service, you can tell Azure to auto-scale your application for you. So as and when there is demand, Azure should do the replication and auto-scaling, horizontal scaling. Azure will do all of that for you. But then that comes at a high price, and you're going to get a lot of bills very, very soon. So I wouldn't worry very much about scaling as much as I would worry about get the app out there in front of users now. So which of them can I, especially if you are now starting, if you have an established application and all of that, yes, you assess your needs. I always say scaling and optimization are very advanced topics that practically very few applications would want to worry about. Very, very few applications would want to worry about. So if you are starting, or even you are a company, you are not Google scale. So I wouldn't worry about scaling as much as I worry about productivity and what gets me out there, what gets the app out there, what gets it in front of users fast. So for instance, in Payara Cloud as well, you can set auto-scaling options. If I go to configure, edit application here, there is horizontal scaling here. So you can set it and the service itself will manage the scaling. When there is a spike, the service will spawn replicas and all of that for you to manage the scaling. When there's none, it will descale it. But I wouldn't worry about scaling for starters as much as I worry about just get it out there, get a minimum viable product out there, just make your users happy. Most of the time, focusing on delivering business value eventually solves half the problems you're going to have. Of course, no amount of scaling, no amount of optimization can fix bad code. So first, follow good developer practices, write generally good code, and then most of the time, you really wouldn't worry about scale, except in very few cases, except in very Google scale levels of users, then you can worry about. But for starters, just get started. So for instance, okay, I have an app idea, or I'm a company, we are a small company, but we really don't have a DevOps department. Okay, sign up for Payara Cloud, bring your own binary, get it out there. So in 20 minutes, you have a URL that people can access your application from. And so right off the bat, you have a minimum viable product out there. And there is nothing that will give you feedback like getting your product. No amount of test, no amount of meetings, nothing can get your product to become better than feedback you get from real users. And so your focus ideally should be faster turnaround, get the product out there and let the users see it. So for scaling, yes, there are options, but it's really not something I like talking about or recommend for starters because you end up with a lot of complexities, mostly for not for that much return, really.
Okay,
great. Any other question?
Yeah, does anyone have any other questions? Please put them in the chat or in the question and answer, and Lukman can answer them now. Feel free to type any questions there.
Yes. So there is just about 7 minutes. While we wait for questions, we could also start wrapping up. But then let me just be sure. Raphael, did I answer your question? I hope I did. Yeah. So to sum up, Jakarta EE deployment is really, it has come a long way from the days of J2 EE and Java EE and all of that to the current era where you have options out there. The largely popular option is the infrastructure as a service, which is offered by all the cloud providers. And then we have the native runtime option, which in most ways is a first in the industry. It's just native Jakarta EE, where you simply bring your own binary, is Payara Cloud. So assess these two options, take Payara Cloud for a trial, take infrastructure as a service, package your application as Docker, push it to a registry, spawn an app service, and then take it for a spin. It doesn't have to be Azure. It can be Google app service. It can be Google cloud platform. It can be Amazon Web Service. It shouldn't really matter. It can be any of them, but try that, and then also try Payara Cloud, and then you assess the options and see which makes you productive, which gets your product out there, which gets you faster turnaround and all of that. And then you can make an informed decision that gives you a lot of value for money. Yeah. So I will just hand over to you, Priya, in the absence of
we have one more question,
okay.
Which I'll read out. Is there a quick way to deploy to Payara Cloud via Maven? Maven plugin, so we could automate our CI/CD flow from code build to deployment? That's the first question.
Yes, there is Payara Cloud command line interface that you can add to your pipeline to directly push. You can even set up Payara Cloud right from your GitHub repo to push to Payara Cloud. And yeah.
Great. And then the second question, which I can answer, and you can as well, Lukman, is there a sandbox Payara Cloud service for trial for developers without breaking the bank? And the answer is, yeah, there is a 15-day free trial. You won't be charged. You will enter your bank details and your company tax ID, but there'll be no charge, and it's very easy to cancel. It's not like some subscription services where the cancel option is difficult and hidden away. It's very easy to cancel, but you can use it for 15 days completely free of charge. And if you follow the link that I've shared in the chat, you can see instructions for the free trial. There's a video which guides you through how to do the free trial, and you can use it there.
Yeah, so you can sign up for free and then do exactly what we did. The video of this recording should be available as well. So you can watch it later and then do exactly as I did. But you should take Payara Cloud for a trial, so you have an experience with all the options out there, because I'm very sure everybody here has set up a virtual machine in one way or the other. So take Payara Cloud also for a trial, so you have experience with all options, and then you can pick the best that works for you. So definitely do sign up for a free trial. Yes, at no cost, of course.
Yeah, great. So are there any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions being asked, so I think we're probably all right to wrap up. I've got the link to the Payara Cloud there in the chat, and thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you, Lukman, for such a great presentation, and we'll be sending that around afterwards. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you too, and see you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye, see you.